Hey everybody, Charlie here. Welcome back to Conquering Kerbal Space Program, episode 102. It has been nearly a year since episode 101. Yeah, so congratulations if you're one of those people who have found the series well after it's been produced. You didn't have to wait a year, but all the rest of you guys who are awesome, sorry. That's all I could say. It's been a very busy year for me. I've been very busy with Twitch, very busy with other projects, and overall, I'm really enjoying being a variety guy that can have a variety of experiences with people, and it's been really great. And not doing KSP has enabled me to have a lot of those great experiences and grow not only as a media producer, but also as a person. But that being said, I really do like KSP. I keep saying I do. I keep saying I want to get back into it. Here's 102. Let's see how it does. A year ago, you might remember, we landed a probe on Duna. Got some sweet science for that. That's nice. Also, that was right after we got the satellite network set up for Duna. That's awesome. And we also built our first real interplanetary crafts to send out away from Kerbin. In this case, some really cool base modules for Eve. And all that kind of went okay. I'll talk about that in a little bit. We had some mod conflicts that kind of screwed things up. But in addition to the base modules that are eventually going to be manned, we did send out a lot of unmanned stuff to Eve in order to build our satellite network, just like we did for Duna. The network around Eve is also being made pretty similar to Duna as well, with the 3 satellites communicating in a triangle pattern. Each of the satellites has very specific purposes. Some of them are just used for communication stuff, very, very simple, basically needs nothing at all on them, while other things have other specific purposes, like getting useful information about the surface, biome information, and of course, a whole lot of cool science. We're actually getting close in our campaign to the point where we don't even need a whole lot more science to at least complete my objective. Kind of unlocked most of the stuff that's needed to be unlocked in order to do a base on every single planet. There are a few other little parts here and there that I'd like to try out, and if you wait till the very end of this video, I'll even give you a sneak peek at something I've been working on for... I say I've been working on it for months, but what I really mean is I used to be working on it for months. Obviously, I haven't played KSP in quite a long time, but the craft's still there. I still have plans for it. It's going to be sweet. You can see that at the end of the video. Just like Duna, the first thing we want to arrive is the big old satellite package. And their first order of business is getting something that can transmit data all the way to Kerbin into a polar orbit around Eve. Because that's like the very first thing we gotta have before anything else. Remember, we're using remote tech, gives us a big delay. It also means we can't actually control anything if we don't have a signal. So that's priority number 1. Of course, on its way to Eve, this craft can also get us a whole bunch of science in transit, as well as way high above the place before it even gets closer. Our science satellites will eventually be in a slightly eccentric and also slightly angled orbit from the equator so that it can fly over multiple biomes and also at various altitudes. So if there's ever a contract that says, get me science around some so-and-so biome in space, I'll already have a satellite in place to do it. I won't have to send one out to do it. After our relay is in position, it's time to get the little guys out and get them in that triangle pattern that we know and love so that we can kind of complete our network and get it ready for the other more important crafts to arrive. Namely, the craft that will be landing on the surface of Eve, just like we did for Duna a year ago, so that we can get surface science there too. The Eve mission, at least as far as satellites are concerned, went pretty great. What didn't go so great was the modules I'm sending to the surface later, and that's kind of because of some mod conflicts. Basically, our main Pioneer module with all the drills and stuff, it sort of decided to kind of spaz out and go completely out of control the moment I lost connection with Kerbin, despite already having clear instructions in the flight computer already. And there wasn't a whole lot I could do to save it. I did try to revert save back to when it did have a connection, give remote tech orders once more, but it seems like as soon as you turn the game off, or at least, basically as soon as you power down the game and reboot the game, remote tech seems to forget what you've told it to do, and that's causing a problem with my missions because I'm clearly not leaving KSP open all the time. So my compromise in this position, I don't really like it, but I don't think this is my fault. I've decided to edit the craft into Orbit of Eve as planned, so the craft will be in Orbit of Eve already. However, to kind of balance it out a little bit, I have drained it of all of its fuel. So while I didn't have to work to get it in a perfect orbit that I want, I will have to rendezvous with it and put fuel in it later if I want to use it. Speaking of remote tech problems, I'm also kind of concerned about our crew that's on their way to Earlham as well. See, because the flight computer keeps forgetting what I tell it to do, it also will forget to thaw these Kerbals, and they're gonna arrive on time, but they won't be thawed, and therefore they'll just float into the abyss of space and probably end up, well, somewhere I don't want them to be, and they'll never come back. So, again, I tell the flight computer to do something at a certain time, just like the mod is designed to work, but it doesn't seem to remember my commands. I might have to cheat that when the time is right as well. And it seems to be like the only real solution to that problem is just updating the mod, which at this stage also requires me to update the game itself. KSP, at least on my computer, with my save file, is kind of a really complicated game. It doesn't like having its files messed with, and I mean, I'm gonna look into updating it, I guess, but I'm kind of not gonna invest a whole lot of headaches into rebuilding things if KSP is not going to be around at least a lot more often in the future. And we'll talk about more about that and the future of this series at the end of the video as well. With the science satellites and the surface scanning satellites in place, our network around Eve at least is done. But I did make one teeny tiny little problem, and that is that I kind of accidentally sent both interplanetary relays to Eve, like the body of Eve, instead of sending one of them to Gilly. So I can't actually make the network around Gilly because I don't have a relay for it. Kind of made a mistake there, but the good news is there's at least a little bit of extra redundancy around the big purple planet. Of course, constant maintenance is required on our surface base on Minmus. This is our primary manufacturing facility, and I do need to check back here often just to see whether or not we are running low on any raw resources, whether there's a hole in my production, whether we're able to get all the material kits that we need, as well as manufacturing the machine parts and the specialized parts for building crafts. We are going to be sending the overwhelming majority of our rockets from the surface of Minmus to take them to interplanetary space, because it's just way cheaper, and by way cheaper I mean free. All it costs us is time, and as long as we can keep this base operational, we'll be in business. You guys already know this, of course, if you've been watching this, but since it's been a year between episodes, I thought I'd just kind of refresh people. Look, this is our surface base. Do you remember? I had to refresh myself too, so don't feel bad if you're just like, oh yeah, right, I've totally forgot about that. Yeah, I know. There's also other matters to attend to around Kerbin as well, and we have our giant space plane here, which is going to be doing several missions in one flight. As you guys know, I like to do multiple contracts in a flight, and while I could send this stuff all up with individual rockets for their all individual purposes, I like to kind of challenge myself to see how many different contracts and how many different things I can do for myself with a single craft and with a single flight. And so this space plane is going to do several different things, including going to the station to resupply some things there. It's going to hit the Minmus space station. That's the one that's orbiting around Minmus, because we have a contract to put staff there. I don't want staff there, so I have to finagle a little way to kind of cheat that, and you'll see that here in a moment. It's that little crew module there that I just put in the cargo bay. We're also going to be landing this plane on the surface of Minmus so that we can perform several other contracts for various tourism needs. Most of the contracts that present the biggest challenge for me with this plane are tourism contracts. The plane is hauling a lot of tourists. Some of them just want to go to space, others want to go to the PISS, some of them want to go to the station that's orbiting Minmus. Oddly enough, the contract is to crew that, or at least tourists want to go to that. Very odd. Also, there's a substantial amount of tourists, like 7, that want to visit the Minmus ground base. So we're taking a whole lot of people on this plane, and this plane has to go a lot of different places. In the cargo bay, I'm also taking some extra science modules for Station Science, the mod that ultimately changes how we have to do science on space stations. I'm taking a refill of all the different experimental tanks there. And I'm taking a bunch of material kits in the cargo bay as well, because I want to stock material kits at the Minmus base just to sort of accelerate a particular project. I've got some spare cash left over, so I figured might as well. We had to make a couple of modifications to this plane, and I'm going to be straight up with you, I don't actually remember what they were, because the footage you're seeing from this entire video was recorded and streamed like 7 months ago. So I'm actually not entirely sure the modifications we made. I want to say it had to do with some sort of parts that were inside the cargo bay. They just weren't really compatible with the aerodynamics model that we're using in the game, which is stock. So I guess the parts inside the plane were only made for Ferrum Aerospace Research, I assume. Either way, it prevented the plane from kind of getting to the speed it needed. It created this artificial drag that shouldn't have existed. But once we figured that out, we got the plane to orbit really easily. We get the thing going around a little bit and rendezvous with the station in no time. I still marvel at the beauty of this game. Oh God, space is so cool. And just like having this craft floating around, even if the frame rates are a bit poor, it all just looks beautiful with this astronomer's visual pack on here. The individual modules inside the cargo bay are all kind of able to maneuver themselves in space, so we're just going to take out this extra Station Science stuff, pop it on this little docking port, and we'll just forget about it for now. We'll refill the supplies that we need inside the plane, including a little bit more monopropellant, and then we'll just undock and get ourselves out towards Minmus. So this contract requires that I staff Kerbals on this Minmus space station that we have orbiting Minmus. The primary function of the Minmus station was originally just a contract, but I was also going to kind of use it as sort of like this nice hub where I could transfer generated resources, transfer refined resources to that station, and then it would make it really easy to kind of obtain them and bring them back to the PISS or wherever else we wanted to go. It basically made it easier to get a hold of resources so that I didn't need to go all the way down to the surface to get them. That's exactly what I was going to do, at least, and I'm not entirely sure if I'm going to keep with that because it's actually kind of easy to get to the surface, but regardless, this station does exist, and the contract said I should do this. No, I don't have to do the contracts. I've read so many comments over the last year on so many different videos, and There's a common theme for some of them, but I don't really care to address as many of them as I feel like people want me to. But one of the comments that I will address is that, yes, I know I can just say no to contracts. I don't have to do them, but they are money. And I kind of have career mode on, and I'm kind of like managed by money. I don't need money nearly as much now as I used to need it before we had our Minmus base up, and over time I'll need money less and less as we get more and more bases up. But for now, I need money, so I'm gonna do the contracts. It provides a little bit of a challenge, and since we have life support stuff on, I can't exactly just time accelerate 2 years in the future and expect my Kerbals to just survive it. So I'm gonna be around. I might as well just have some fun in the game and do some little challenges here and there. So it was kind of fun. It was a little bit different, and it was, I think it was really enjoyable. Of course, all of this footage you're also seeing is from live streams, and I mentioned it a little bit earlier. Like, live streaming Kerbal Space Program is something I am interested in doing, and if it gets a decent showing on Twitch, I might continue it there, but for the most part, I think I'm probably going to be most effective in this series, or at least most efficient, at least, by doing it without streaming, because it's easier on my system resources, but it's also easier on my time. I get to pick and choose what I want to record, and I don't have to deal with like a huge amount of footage for all like the chat breaks and stuff, because I'm not going to just stream Kerbal Space Program and not chat with people. Live streams are all about interaction for me. It's like 100% about being there with people, not just presenting something for people. The for people part is YouTube, and I think that's what Kerbal Space Program is going to be most successful with. It's going to be most successful in an environment where I can just take my time with it, really think about things, and kind of remove the other distractions that live streaming provides. That's not to say I don't want to stream Kerbal Space Program, but I think the Conquering series is not going to be streamed as much as I originally thought I was going to. There were some comments about that too, because I did mention it. I did say, hey, I'm going to stream this now, and we'll make videos that way. And then I kind of did for a couple of days, and then I realized that the viewership live wasn't quite what I anticipated. And the experience of doing it live makes the post-production process, the editing process on this, even more difficult. There's over 700 gigabytes of footage here. Like, put that in perspective. Look at your laptop, your computers that you have, see how much storage space you have in your computer, and then think about what it would be like if I took 700 gigabytes of that away from you and just have it sit there and stored on your computer for 8 months. And that's kind of what's happened here. I mean, admittedly, it's my fault. I could have just edited this footage, but I've been having such a good time being a variety guy. I've experienced immense growth that I didn't think I would get in other ways. And overall, I just really care about the interaction part of live streaming and sort of just playing a lot of different games. Kerbal Space Program will always have a special place in my heart as far as playing the game, but the video creation process has always been this double-edged sword for me. The plane is arriving at the Minmus station, and it kind of looks really funny having this plane sort of taxiway itself into the base like this. It also makes this nice rotation and kind of pulls itself right in there like the station is some sort of, I don't know, moon airport. So our Kerbals are going to do several things throughout this, and of course this is like 20 hours of playtime condensed into a 40-minute video, so don't expect to see all the details. I know some of you guys out there like to see the details on things and take it slower and see each and every step, and I'm one of those guys too, but there's a lot of people who followed this series who like to more quick approach things, like to see things summarized, and like to see the progress of things, and I need to cater to both of those people, so just keep that in mind, that if this episode or some other previous episodes weren't quite the way you would like them presented, there's probably other episodes that were presented a different way that might appeal to you more. It's sort of just like the diversity of audience, and I try to present things catering to everybody, which is usually impossible. So you might remember one of the contracts I said was that tourists wanted to go to the Minmus station. Well, there are 5 tourists total that wanted to go to the station. 3 of them wanted to be on one of the modules, the habitation part of the station, and 2 of them wanted to be on the other part of the station, because you might remember this space station here, this ground base, is actually two separate bases really close together, and the contract actually has both of them involved. So I'm hooked up to the habitation module with the plane, and that's actually satisfying the contract for 3 of the tourists just by being hooked up to it. But the other 2 tourists, they want to go to the other part of the base, and I can't just hook the plane up to both parts at the same time, because I had that concern we had a long time ago, which you might not remember if it's been a while for you, where the root part would actually change, and I need to make sure that the manufacturing part of this base is located in a different biome than the habitation part of the base. So to prevent any type of conflicts from happening, I need to make sure that I never connect these 2 bases together. So I devised a little creative solution to this. I made this nifty little, not very attractive looking connection port that would then situate itself next to the base. I would use ground vehicles to maneuver it into position, and then I would use the flexi tubes to connect it. And it looks like it's a docking port, big docking port senior, and that's because it is. And you might be wondering, how in the hell is that little thing going to help you connect tourists to the base? Well, it's kind of funny, and it was actually really fun to stream this part because there was a lot of people making fun of me on how not to fly certain modules. But the flexi tube is going to connect to this, and that officially makes that part of the base. Then I'm going to take the habitation module out of the cargo bay and try to maneuver it with RCS to get it into position. Not as easy as I thought it would be. And again, this is all fun to do live and have people make fun of me. It was really enjoyable. So eventually I kind of cave a little bit. I get this little vehicle in place and I go too fast and I ram it. Yeah, I mean, granted, this footage is sped up a little bit for you, but it still was pretty funny. Eventually, I would get this little vehicle to grab a hold of this module properly, and I would eventually find a way to push it through. It doesn't have a whole lot of power, and I have to drag it on the ground. Where there's a will, there is a way, and this module does eventually line up the docking port senior with the other docking port senior. And I'll let the magnets do their work. The tourists are inside this little module, and that means the tourists get to have a nice time on the base for at least a little while. Now I'm gonna leave these vehicles alone. I'm gonna let them sit here a while because I need to transfer all of these material kits out of the plane, and I also need to refuel the plane. So that's why there's fuel being produced on this base so that we could dock ships here. It was at this point here that I would realize that the big ring fuel tank that I have as sort of like the stabilized bottom of my power station here doesn't actually support planetary logistics, which means when this thing fills up, I can't put it and store it in planetary logistics. And that sucks, because it means that once that tank fills up, I stop making fuel, and there's not nearly enough fuel in that little round tank, as big as it is, to fill up this plane. And so I need to devise a different way of doing things. And so back to the drawing board we go. I'm just gonna send these 2 tanks up to Minmus on this little cart. I'm gonna put these little ports on here so I can hook it up with hoses and connect it to that power station so that these tanks, which do have planetary logistics compatibility, will be able to store little bits of fuel as sort of like an overflow, and then that stuff can send the extra fuel to planetary logistics. That way I don't have to worry about this tank filling up. I kind of have unlimited supply like I do with most other things. I've also included a monopropellant tank here because I don't currently have a way to store monopropellants on the planetary logistics either. So once again, our little surface car is gonna move these tanks into position, just narrowly scraping by the wing of the plane, and it's gonna position it so that our trusted engineer can hook it up to the base. all that hooked up, there's one final check of resource management, and then it's time to disconnect these silly tourists from the base so that they can go back into the plane and get back to Kerbin. Of course, this little car cannot actually put it in the cargo bay. No, I'm gonna have to try to figure out how to fly this thing into the cargo bay. And it might seem easy, but it actually wasn't at the time. Maybe it's because I'd been streaming a long time, or maybe it's just not that easy, I don't know. Either way, it was pretty fun. I said some words and a lot of non-words. There are clips of it. But eventually I would figure out that I need to sit this thing upright to properly control it, and once I did, I got it into the cargo bay without much issue. Just get it in the little hole there and let the magnets do the rest of the work. Now with that done, it's time to manufacture a couple of things with the material kits that we brought. And this is the reason why I brought them. You might remember that earlier in this episode, I said that I made a mistake and put both relays in orbit of Eve. Well, that means I need another relay out there, so that's what this is. It's got way more delta V than required, and that's because it's taking a more direct route to Eve. Very inefficient, but very fast way of getting it out there. Because I don't want to wait more than a year to start fixing this problem. I want it out there now, so that's what it's doing. And with all the material kits transferred to the base, out of the plane, I figured I might as well just break down these tanks and get the extra material kits for those breakdowns, as well as pretty much break down anything else inside the cargo bay that I just don't need, remembering to focus most of the weight of the cargo bay to the front of the plane. With our business concluded on the Minmus ground base, it is now time for our plane and all of its crew and passengers to leave Minmus the way it came. Which is to say, taking off very much like a plane would in atmosphere, because that's what I decided to do. Also remember that the mods we have installed, for whatever reason, are putting clouds and even thunderstorms on Minmus. I still have to figure out how to get rid of those. I haven't quite figured that out yet. Now, one of the things we also did at the Minmus base this time is rotate crew. So I'm actually bringing some of the crew that was on the Minmus base before back with me on this plane, and I've dropped off new crew at the Minmus base now. So crew rotations I think are pretty healthy. I don't know if it was necessarily required. Some of the crew I brought back said it had indefinite on their homesickness, but I figured it might be nice to kind of rotate crew, get a few different people there. So that's what I'm doing. I also left 2 tourists on the PISS, and they needed to be on there for a little bit. So I figured I might as well just leave them on the station and then pick them back up when we come back. So that's what I've been doing as well. So this plane is gonna aerobrake and use Kerbin's atmosphere to slow down a little bit, making it more efficient. I am then going to go way too deep in the atmosphere and realize it way too late. And it was nice. It was a little bit scary, but our aero brakes, all 12 of them, burned up. Did not make it through our aero brake excursions. Everything else on the plane is fine, but the aero brakes for some reason just did not last. Either way though, the plane did manage to get its pass through the atmosphere safe and sound, and we will then proceed to the station. land after dropping off our crew, picking up the couple of tourists, and dropping off all of our spare monopropellant and fuel. We are undocking from the station and preparing ourselves for re-entry to Kerbin. Now, you guys might remember I've had my problems with SSTOs and actually getting re-entry and trying to land them on the runway. It's one of those things I've always wanted to do and I just haven't gotten a chance to really do successfully yet, is land a plane from space after orbiting and land it on the runway. And that's exactly what I wanted to do with this plane. I was so grateful to finally make it through the atmosphere safely this time without having to use parachutes to land. And I would see the runway in front of me. My trajectory was great. I was so excited. In fact, I was too excited because I was going way too fast. And I kind of overshot 60% of the runway and decided by the time I did get down to speed and was about to land, I sort of decided I am not going to be able to stop this plane in time. I need to pull up and make another pass. And so that's kind of what we had to do, unfortunately. But luckily, I have lots of experience flying in the atmosphere in KSP, so making a round and trying to land the plane wasn't that hard. However, I have never landed this plane and this heavy of a plane before. So the size of the plane and sort of how it maneuvers for landing, I have actually never experienced before this moment because I'd never been able to successfully get this thing back into the atmosphere to do so. Approaching from the water though, I finally nailed it and got my speed right, got my approach right, maybe just a little bit low too early, but I would eventually get myself down on the runway, nice and safe, nice and easy. Unfortunately, the front wheel of the plane doesn't really steer very well. It doesn't really like to steer, and so once you get going one direction and you kind of start turning, you can't really stop it from turning. So while I did land on the runway, I had to actually stop the plane from the grass anyway. Sad face, but it's at least a safe landing, and it was at this point that I finally remembered what I had installed on this plane to help me land a long time ago, that there were actually some parachutes that can help you slow down. If I only would have remembered that on my initial approach, I could have actually looked like I knew what I was doing. But alas, I'm still me. And so, while it is a safe landing, it is not necessarily as graceful and as professional as I would have liked. Still, full salvage. The mission was a success. All 6 contracts done in a single flight. It was marvelous. So anyway, that is the conclusion of today's episode. KSP 102 has been released before the end of 2018 as promised, and I would really like to hear your feedback. I would really like to hear your comments, and if you like this series, if you like this video, and you want me to keep doing more, you have to show your support for it. Now, I don't normally ask this. I don't pester people about these types of things because I just don't necessarily feel like it's good form, but this series, we have a bit of a history with this. You do, I do. I'm really invested in it, and if you guys want me to continue this, just understand that this series takes an enormous amount of work compared to something else, compared to doing any other game, pretty much. In order for me to sustain this as a series that I can continue, I need to see it supported. And that doesn't mean money. It means your comments. It means your likes. Share the video with your friends. It means just your consistent viewership. I cannot sustain this series, and I cannot make time to create these videos for this game without consistent viewership for it. When I brought Conquering KSP back after the SSD crash, it had substantially lower viewership than it used to. It needs to get back to its glory if it's going to survive. I would love your input. This is sincere. This is very sincere. I would love your input on how I can attain that and how we can somehow make this a sustainable series that I can continue to do. Because when there are games like Prison Architect where it takes me 45 minutes to put together a video and get it uploaded, and it gets way more views than KSP, which takes 15 hours to create one video, it just, as you can tell, doesn't really work. So if I'm going to continue this for video, I need to see consistent viewership for it, and I need your support for it as well. You may not understand this, or you may not know this, but by commenting under this video, you are, in terms of what YouTube sees, you are engaging with it. It means the video is more engaging, which means it would be more likely to show up in current subscriber feeds. These are people who have already subscribed to this channel, who have already said, I'd like to see more of his videos, but they may not see this video because YouTube cannot show you every video from every channel that you subscribe to. It's just not possible. It's really important that if you want this to be successful and you want to see more of it, that you engage with these videos. Eventually, over time, it will become less of somewhat of a requirement, and I'm never going to ask this again. Like, I'm never going to take a moment in a video to ask this type of thing again. I actually feel kind of uncomfortable doing it right now anyway, because it just doesn't feel quite like what I would like to do. But at the end of the day, this is a requirement. This has to happen, because without that engagement, I don't see the interest. And if I don't see the interest from you guys, I can't justify spending the time on it. So let me know, comments down below. You can like this video if you want to see more KSP. I'm gonna start on KSP 103 very soon. I'm gonna start brainstorming some thoughts on where to go from here. And as a way of saying goodbye for today, I'm gonna give you a sneak peek at something that I've been working on for a little bit. It is not done yet. It has a lot of things that need to be fine-tuned with it. But when it is done, I think it will be a marvelous creation, and I think it will really work wonders for a lot of missions to come. So thanks for watching, and I'm gonna reply to like every comment I can for this video. So I really wanna hear your feedback. Thank you, bye.